Welcome back to another episode of Local Rigs. My name is Charlie, and once again, we are here at River City Studios in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Today we have AJ Dunning to show you his local rig.
Hi, my name is AJ Dunning. Happy to be here with Charlie at River City. A little bit about myself. I grew up in Lansing, playing in cover bands for years and years and years. I've played with bands such as the Cones, the Jet Beats, also worked with Cold Cash Machine, with Miles to Mars, and in '92 auditioned for the Verve Pipe. I joined March of '93, worked with those guys up until, I want to say, early summer of 2002. And currently I'm playing in a band called the Frog King, which of all things is a Neil Diamond tribute band. Of all the gear that I brought today, this one's probably one of the more special ones. This is a 62 Telly. This used to belong to Jimmy Vivino in Conan's band. I bought it in '98 when the Verve Pipe was doing the Frog record in New York City. We had a tech come in that was helping our drummer and keyboard player out. End of that day, asked me if there was anything I'd be interested in, and told him I'd like an old Telly, but I wouldn't want to give up my firstborn child to afford one. And he brought this in the next day, and before I'd even plugged it in, pulled it out of the case and played it, and it just spoke to me, you know, to use an overly used cliche, but it really is true. And it's been kind of my right arm ever since. I've had a new nut put on it, just recently had it refretted by Mark Swanson. Graphtec saddles, which I'm due for a replacement on, and I just recently put a new harness in it. Plays a little stiff. It's not the most comfortable thing in the world to try to pull off a bunch of different styles on, but I guess the school of thought there is that if you can do it on a Telly, you can pretty much do it on anything. This is a Vox AC15 C1. This has kind of been my primary gigging amp for the better part of 4 or 5 years. It has the greenback in it. It does not have the Celestia, the blue speaker in it. I actually prefer the sound of the greenback. It breaks up a little quicker. The only mod that I've done to this, and there's a few that you can do, but I've done what's called a bright cap mod to it, which is essentially lifting a resistor off of the input. And what that does is it makes this amp a lot more pedal friendly. Overdrive pedals, fuzz pedals, even some high output modulation pedals have a tendency to sound a little harsh, a little hairy through it. Doing the bright cap mod definitely smooths out the high end a little bit. The other thing that I do with this amp is instead of running just one channel or the other, I actually run them both together. Clean side out of the normal, and then just add a little bit of grit off of the top boost side of it, and makes the amp a little throatier, throws a little better, breaks up a little quicker, but also allows you to dial your guitar volume back to really clean the tone up. And pulling your guitar all the way up with this way this is set up, you get a little bit of grit to it. The cabinet that it's on top of is an old Bandmaster 212 cab. I've got a pair of Celestion vintage 30s in it. The cabinet itself doesn't really throw that much. It's primarily there to not only facilitate the amp not shooting at my shins so I can hear it, but it does provide a little more bottom end to it, makes the tone a little rounder. So, and it's a loud 15 watt amp. This is my main board. This is the one I do most of my gigging with. Looks a lot more convoluted than really what it is, but I kind of like to have plenty of options doing what I'm doing. Signal path starts with the compression, which is always on, out of the compressor into the single pedal tamer, which is a looper for this ring thing, which I use for tremolos, pitch shifting, certain modulation things. Out of that, it feeds into the switch box, which is also another looper that holds these 4 boxes, overdrives, fuzzes, another overdrive, a boost pedal. Out of that, into another boost and overdrive pedal, and then back into another Circus Freak box, and this is a Tattooed Lady overdrive, and I use it primarily just for gain and for EQ. Out of that, into the volume pedal, out of the volume pedal into all the modulation stuff, which is the Eventide Mod Factor, TC Flashback, Electro Harmonix Deluxe Memory Man, and a Hall of Fame Mini Reverb. And then I have an expression pedal that controls whatever I need it to on the Eventide. And then this whole thing is wired with George L cable for the most part, with the exception of this green stuff. And then underneath it, if you can see it, I've got the power supply, which is an MXR built custom audio electronics power supply. It does everything from 9 volt to 18 volt. Also has a couple of inputs for to be able to sag certain boxes. Say you've got an old fuzz pedal that you're trying to get it to imitate the sound of a dying battery. Dialing the voltage down, and that will cause that fuzz pedal to get spitty sounding. And that's pretty much it. This is a 72 Strat. A little bit of history about this guitar. This was given to me actually by a friend of mine. Belonged to her brother, and he had gone off to some really strict Reformed Baptist college, and when he got back that following year, had decided it was a tool of the devil and wanted it out of the house, and he was ready to pitch it in the trash. Went over to visit my friend Jane one day, and she said, "Hang on a second, I've got something for you." Walked back out of the house with a guitar case in her hands, and I knew what she had because I played the thing before. Anyway, long story short, she twisted my arm to take it, and the first thing I did to it, unfortunately, was took it home, ripped it apart, and I took a chisel to the inside of it because I wanted to stuff 3 humbucking pickups in it to be KK Downing or something. So yeah, I chiseled it out, and over the years I've got it refilled now with foam, but this is really the first real electric that I owned. I had owned a couple before. About the only thing stock on this is the wood, maybe the string trees. New machines, new pickups. I believe they're old Fender lace sensors. Real fat fret wire on it. I want to say it's 6150 Dunlop. Again, Graphtec saddles. My ex-wife's initials scratched out of it. It's pretty beat. This thing's been around, but doesn't get a whole lot of play anymore. It's not one that I'm likely to take out of the house too frequently. Just not that it's worth a whole lot of money. It's just the sentimental value of it. But this is a 65 Danelectro Convertible. Picked this up in South Carolina someplace. I was on the road and had an amplifier blow up on me and was in a mad dash to try to find a spot to repair it. and I found a spot, and I wish I could remember the name of the shop. It evades me, but they had this hanging on the wall, and I'd always wanted one of these. I remember seeing a band called the Busboys years and years ago, would have opened for the Stray Cats, I believe, early 80s at Lansing Civic Center, and their guitar player played one of these, and I was always fascinated with them. Didn't know anything about them, but it's a pretty unique piece. I've used it a lot in the studio, occasionally live. It's Formica or Masonite or something. It's basically a lunch counter, and it's got kind of a, I wouldn't say quite a dobro kind of thing to it, but it has a little more snap than an acoustic guitar does, and translates really well through an amp. This is a 90s made in Japan Strat. I bought this right before I moved to Atlanta, just to have another Strat. This is what the original color used to be. My friend Steve Olson at Elderly painted this for me. I want to say mid-90s, and this is the damage that I've done to it since. Again, very little stock on this piece. Vintage staggered Duncans. Paul Reed Smith saddles, of all things. Again, 6150 wire, locking tuners, of which you can tell I've replaced a couple because they died on me. Again, not a guitar that gets a whole lot of play from me. I usually bring it as a backup for the telly. If I'm able to get through the entire evening with the telly, I will. But always nice to have something like this in your back pocket. This is a mid-90s Epiphone Riviera. Funny story about this guitar. This was left behind. I used to work at Rip Music down on Division Street, and this guitar had been hanging on the workbench for the better part of a year. And I happened to ask Gary Nimchek, the repair guy there at the time, what was going on with this guitar. Apparently somebody had left it behind, didn't pay for a repair. Gave Gary $100 for it, and basically did all this stuff to it. Again, nothing stock on this guitar. Machines, the Bigsby, the wiring harness. The pickups are Darmaggio made. It's an Eric Johnson model that is supposed to be patterned after Filtertrons. Not totally there, but the nice thing about them is they're not incredibly high output. So to jump from this guitar to a single coil equipped instrument isn't too much of a big jump. and wouldn't require me to turn around and tweak the amp or the pedal board too awful much to get them to play nice. But this guitar, I pretty much put this together when I was playing with the Jet Beats, wanted something with a Bigsby on it, something with a little fatter of a tone, some of the old Beatles stuff. But yeah, that's pretty much the deal with this one. And it's red. It's very red. This is a 1966 Silvertone 1451 Hornet. Only did them in 66, cut like a non-reverse Firebird. Single lipstick pickup in it, and I just use it open tuning for slide. And the cool thing about these guitars is when Sears sold them out of their catalog back in the day, these things came with an amp in the case. And you can see it here. Still works. It's a little noisy. I've actually done gigs with this. When I lived in Cincinnati, I was part of a band that did an open mic night, like a blues type band. And the stage had a little shelf on it where I would set this thing up and put a mic in front of it, run a couple pedals through it, and certainly loud enough right at my head to be able to hear it. But cool little find. Like a gremlin though, everything's Silvertone. It's this presswood stuff, and you never want to get it wet because it'll fold and buckle on you.
And that brings us to the end of this episode of Local Rigs. I want to thank AJ Dunning. Thanks to River City Studios for having us out again. And if you like what you see, make sure you subscribe and like and share. Thanks a lot, and we'll see you next time.